Always takes forever. And welcome back to episode number 46 of Raise the Banner podcast. I am your co-host, one of your co-hosts, as usual, Matt Couture. Wow, I'm off this morning. Here with Zach Brewitt, Benny Ballgame, as usual, and today's special guest, usually tonight. I'm not used to these Saturday morning podcasts, but 98.5's Joe Murray. How you doing, Joe?
Morning. I am also not ready for these morning. Well, I'm a vampire during the day, man, working nights. So appreciate you having me, though.
Yeah, I appreciate you getting up for this. When we connected and went about this, I was like, oh shit, we're gonna have to do some odd scheduling going about this. Usually I'm nice and tired around our podcast, and I just want to like get it over with. But I'm nice and energized this morning. Feeling good.
There we go.
Yeah. So, all right, let's just jump right into it. We got Red Sox talk, and then I know we got a shit ton of Patriots talk to go over. I do want to start off with the Texas Rangers series that the Red Sox had over earlier this week. They won the first two games. Everything was looking nice and pretty going into game three. They had a 3-run lead with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth, and things just blew up. Winkowski got up the home run. He hung a curveball right down the middle of the plate because it's exactly what you should do when you're ahead of the count. And they tied the game, took the lead in the top of the 10th, and went on to steal the last game of the series. I know there's a lot of controversy of the bullpen decisions because I know Chris Martin only pitched 4 innings in the 8th inning, and then just the Cora took him out. So I'm really kind of curious your thoughts on that game and where your mind was post game, because I know a lot of people said that was arguably the worst loss of the season. I'll start with you, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue is their bullpen acquisitions, the trade deadline. They're hurting them, right? They're hurting them right now. And
can you guys hear him? Hold on one second, Joe. I'm going to remove you and bring you back in. All right, well, I'll go to you, Zach. What were your thoughts until we get Joe connected?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to share what I think Joe was going to go to, which was just the bullpen acquisitions that we talked about a couple podcasts ago are just not working out. I looked up this morning, Luis Garcia's ERA coming in was, I think, low 3s or mid 3s, right around there. It's over 14 now. After last night's game, we'll get into that a couple seconds here, but like he's just not working out. Lucas Sims has had a couple of bad games, and then like it was just a overall microcosm of everything that's been wrong with this team over the past couple of years. What feels like in terms of bad pitching, bad bullpen, bad defense, and then bad base running decisions. There was a send that I forget who the third baseman is now. It's not Carlos Fables anymore, but he sent. He sent Masataka Yoshida on a throw home, and thank God Wyatt Langford sent it into the first row because otherwise he would have been out by 30 feet. So just really just a bad microcosm of everything that's wrong with this team so far. I mean, David Hamilton twice had 2 really bad errors. I don't know if the first one was technically an error, but up the middle, the little dribbler up the middle, he just misplayed. And then the second one, the double play, that it looked like Romy Gonzalez came off the bag for whatever reason a little bit early. Otherwise, it looked like he might have gotten out in the 9th inning. So just overall, poor bullpen. Help from the acquisitions that we've gotten. Only one I really trust right now is Kenley, and then I mean the offense luckily is keeping us in games. But it looks like every turn they're really trying to just give the game away. Even if they go up by 4 or 5 runs, it looks like it's never a safe lead.
Fair enough. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, obviously a tough way to end it. Interesting decision after Martin only threw a handful of pitches in the 8th to not, put him out there again, especially with a 3-run lead. I can understand if he was a little, Cora was a little concerned about usage for any reason if he only had a 1-run lead. But, with a 3-run lead, anytime he gets into trouble, you can always just make a switch. having said that, I think that maybe that carried over a little bit into Thursday night's game. The offense kind of no-showed, but then they bounced back nice last night. But in that moment, kind of felt like a really, really tough loss. It's nice to see that it didn't really linger. Especially going into a series with the Orioles. You lose those first two games of that series. And you're really, really behind the eight ball. At least they've been able to split the first two, so it certainly doesn't feel like it lingered. But Zach really hit the nail on the head. Sims and Garcia really haven't found their groove. Hopefully they'll get there. The bullpen really has kind of been a strength of this team for the long, long time, and adding to it shouldn't really be a detractor in terms of performance. So hopefully they can turn it around, and maybe it's just a little bit of an adjustment. Obviously, Andrew Bailey seems to have a little bit of a different philosophy when it comes to pitching. Maybe it's just an adjustment period for those two guys, and hopefully they can figure it out and be a key part of the bullpen moving forward. And hopefully they can right the ship and go back to the way things were a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. All right, Joe. Now that we're properly connected, I'll let you get to it.
Of course, I'm going to talk and it goes up. But yeah, you mentioned it. The bullpen acquisitions haven't worked out. I still think that they were good moves. They had to do something. Just imagine what they would look like without having, Sims or these guys. So this is the way the Red Sox have to win now. They have to outscore everybody. They don't have a bullpen. And quite frankly, it does come down to Alex Cora and some of his decisions. He's the guy I want to be the manager here, but he has been, like Brendan Bernardino throwing three batters and three total batters getting 2 outs. You're wasting bullpen arms. And I just feel like the way that he's going about, I don't know if it's too cautious. I don't know if it's too like micromanaging maybe is the word. But what is the worst loss? Like they keep losing games in the 9th, the 10th, and extra innings. Texas was demoralizing, right? It was a terrible loss. But, I still look at the team as they're in it, right? As with all the flaws that they have. And let's not forget that in August, generally, Alex Cora's teams suck. And it's the same thing. So, I don't know. New team, new regime, new GM, whatever. Same old August swoon, that's on Cora. But at the same time, he's given a bunch of crap. He's trying to work with what he has. And, I still blame him. But the acquisitions they got just aren't working right now. But as long as they hit, they'll figure it out. But it's right now it's you have to outscore the other team or you're going to lose.
Yeah, I mean they're I believe it was going into yesterday's game. They had the exact same record as this time last year. Obviously, we know last year at this time, this is around when the wheels fell off. They went down a big spiral, and their record really didn't kind of represent the season as most of the season that they had. They were 8 games above 500 at this point last year, and they ended up, 78 wins last year. So things really fell off, especially in September. It was a disaster. But, I mean, you guys all kind of hit it on the head in the sense that this bullpen has just been a disaster. Garcia has let up 4 home runs now in what is, I think, like 7 innings in Boston, and he had let up 4 home runs in about 47 innings in LA. I don't know if this is Bailey doing something different than usual, than what he really is used to and what he was doing in LA. But at this stage in the game, I don't think Bailey should be trying to mess with someone like Garcia. Let him do what he's used to doing. So if they're making adjustments here, is saying, let's throw the fastball less, let's throw the curveball more. Stop. Like this is something that you mess with maybe in the early season. You mess with some prospects. Like I know the guy Zach Priester, I think it is, that they got Quinn, excuse me. He was disastrous in his first 2 starts here. And then he came in and threw 5 no run innings last night, and he did it over 42 pitches. So he's obviously making adjustments. But for Garcia and Sims, they don't have the luxury and the time to make these adjustments with these type of guys. They got to just kind of go with what has been working with them this year, because we can't be blowing games. We like 1 or 2 games very much might be the reason we miss the playoffs, and that's just it's just a very poor approach. So whether it's Cora needs to tell Bailey to not be doing this with these 2 new guys, or it's Cora just kind of making better decisions. I think going forward for at least the next week, Garcia can't be brought in any type of close game. Like I mean, would you guys trust him at any point being down, up 2-3 runs? I certainly wouldn't.
No, they're very
No,
minimal.
I would.
Right now.
I would.
You would?
I would. Yeah. I understand he's struggling, but this is a 37-year-old guy who's got playoff experience. He's working it out. I don't think Bailey's got anything to do with what he's doing personally. I think it's all situational. I think it's the people they're going against. Cora's not putting the right matchups in. He's putting up against guys with better records than what he's got. I blame Alex Cora. It's Alex Cora. Like, we can talk what we want. It's Alex Cora. He's micromanaging way too much. The Red Sox are exciting, but this is boring to me. What I mean by boring is they don't have anybody. What are you going to go to Priester? Is that what you're going to do? They're going to have to at some point. It's Cora. He's forced to put guys in bad situations. And, the other thing about him is that he's 37 years old. So he might be cooked from his time with Anaheim. So I'd go back to him because he's done it before. And you're going to need him the rest of the way. You can't just go away from him now because he's had a bad couple of starts. But if you want, do you think he's a middle relief guy? No, he's a back end of the bullpen.
No.
Guy.
The one change I would make is just maybe the next outing or 2 to see if he can kind of get it figured out. I would just struggle to bring him in a close game unless it's.
How can you manage that when you're the Red Sox? Like, if you get a 7-3 lead, what are you gonna throw him in the game and then it becomes if he struggles? This guy's a back of the end bullpen guy. That's what he is. So I understand what you're trying to say. Get him right. The Red Sox aren't playing right, so you don't have a situation when you can do that.
Well, the problem is they don't have better options, and so if Kelly was pitching like he was early in the season, if Winkowski was, I don't think he's been bad at any big points, long stretches this year, but if they had a couple more lockdown outside of Martin Jansen, they would have a little bit more luxury of how they can approach with Garcia. But because they don't, they're kind of stuck in this view where whoever is available and whoever has fresh arms, they kind of have to go with. And that goes back to, like you said, Cora's kind of forced into, picking and choosing between a bunch of mediocre arms right now. And I like Alex Cora, the manager, the locker room manager and stuff like that. His game decisions, in my opinion, have been always up and down. I think he makes some really good ones, and then he makes some ones that kind of make you just scratch your head and say, why did you do that? And I think that goes back to what you said. It's a little bit of a micromanaging, over-managing the situation. I hated the idea of Bernardino starting yesterday's game. I think it was a dumb decision. Just go with Cooper Criswell, let him start the game, and that way you have Bernardino in the 6th inning to maybe go, 5 or 6 batters instead of 3 batters. So I agree with you certainly there. And, kind of transitioning into the kind of rotation as a whole. Yeah, you brought up Priester. They might need him. They're signed Rich Hill yesterday. And if you're signing Rich Hill on August 16th in a season that you're trying to make the playoffs, things aren't going very well with your pitching rotation. So, we can go around and get the thoughts there of the exact big issues and what led us to being where we are right now with the pitching situation. But it's not pretty, and if their bats kind of cool off in any way, they're kind of in big trouble.
What about Hendricks? What do you guys think? Think at some point he comes back?
Yeah, I'm thinking early September. Maybe. I think I heard he's going to be going out on a rehab assignment within the next week or so, and they want to get him bare minimum. I want to say it was 5, but probably closer to 7 or 8 outings. So I don't know. Maybe what does that put us? Second week of September, possibly. And if we're still in it, he's going to be, assuming he is who he is. That will be a big addition for the final few weeks. But for all we know, we could be 6 games out by that point.
Yeah, one thing I want to keep in mind, or at least keep an eye on, is the schedule that we have for the rest of the year and the schedule that the Royals have for the rest of the year. Right, we're kind of chasing the Royals. I looked at the schedules just this morning, and we're our gauntlet. We're kind of at the end of it. Right, we had the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Astros and the Orioles. It kind of tails off for a couple of series. We have the Diamondbacks next, then we have the Blue Jays, where it almost flips for the Royals. They have the Indians coming up, then they have the Yankees, and they have another thing with the Astros. So they could completely fall off the wagon too, where we get some help with our schedule. So I want to keep an eye on that. As you said, Liam Hendricks might come back. Now, he might suck for the first couple outings, just getting his feet wet at the major league level. Right, he might kind of go do a Luis Garcia and kind of just give up the home run after home run and looks terrible. And maybe hopefully he figures it out. But we're only 2.5 games out, so I do want to keep an eye on how we bounce back from this gauntlet here and kind of ease up in the next couple of weeks. Because one thing I talked about in our last podcast was how is this team going to respond to the trade deadline? We heard from Rafi Devers and Kenley Jansen last year at just how they really wanted someone. They wanted pitching, they wanted bullpen help, they wanted all these things, and they didn't do it. And then you said before, the wheels fell off. They just kind of stopped trying. Well, they went out and got some help this time around. So they responded well. I think, could they be better? Yeah, but I think I want to keep an eye on, this next couple of weeks here and see how the schedule turns out for us, because it does look like it eases up where the Royals definitely gets a lot harder.
Yeah, I mean, this is the make or break it point. If they're a game or two out come September, kind of all hell breaks loose in September. Anything can happen. And we saw, remember back in the Terry Francona days, what were they up 8 or 9 games on? Was it the Orioles?
Mm-hmm.
And they blew an 8 or 9 game lead in a matter of a month. If September ball comes around, the wheels can fall off for teams. Things get more serious, more intense. So if they can get through, if they could take at least one more of the next 2 with the Orioles, they'll be in a decent spot heading into this little bit of an easier stretch. But it really just comes down to the bullpen. If they can't figure it out, they're likely going to be in a situation where they're looking from the outside in on the playoffs, because for as much as this lineup has been arguably the best in the AL this year, I want to say most of the numbers are either first, second, or third. You can't rely on your offense to have to score 6 or 7 runs every single game, or else you're going to lose. It's not functional as a team. Oh, geez, I'm dropping my phone. I do want to transition into, though, enough Red Sox on the Major League roster. Obviously, we saw Marcelo Mayer, Kyle Teal, and Roman Anthony get their promotions finally in recent weeks. In the recent week, I kind of expected it in early July. Joe, what's your thoughts kind of on the incoming wave of prospects? And I know there's going to be a logjam of left-handed bats and bats in general. How are you viewing how things could play out in the coming year or so?
So I like the Jansen move big time. I think that he might be a part of what they're trying to do in the future. So that might help Kyle, Teal when he finally comes up. I just don't like the fact that they're hyping them up as, the big 3, and it's like the new coming of the Beatles. You know what I'm saying? These are 3 different guys who play different positions. You're going to bring in free agents. You're going to spend money next year. So I'm fine with them going to Worcester and working on it. The expectation that maybe they play next year, I would not set that expectation. The team needs to get better, man. And I know they have pieces, and these guys are going to be a big part of it, but they don't need to come up at the end of the year. They don't. Oh, no. They don't have to start next year with the Red Sox. So I just feel like maybe I know they're trying to do it together. Maybe it was a PR move or whatever, but
when they announced it,
yeah. So
15 minutes after they got their ass kicked by the Astros,
they have to hit on these kids. They have to, and people don't like patience here. But with those, I don't know. The kid Teal, I wonder if he's like Roman Anthony's balling, right? I don't know when the right time to bring them up is, but Teal is a guy that I would let work in Worcester and just really develop and grind. Anthony might be ready. Mayer, I'm still waiting on. I don't know if he's, with the defensive issues with the Red Sox, I don't know if it's, worth it. But let's not forget, Hamilton was one of the best defensive players last year, and he struggled defensively in the majors. So I'd give, Mayer and Teal definitely the time. Anthony might be the first guy out.
Yeah, Ben, where are you on these guys?
I mean, obviously it's the next step in the journey. These guys have been hyped up for a long, long time. And to Joe's point, they have to hit on them. If they're not going to trade the prospects, and I've mentioned this in the past, if they're not going to trade the prospects, then you have to spend a little more than they've done, which they haven't really shown a willingness to do that. They slashed payroll again. So I think that puts an extra emphasis on making sure that these guys are ready to go. Because if you don't follow the process and call them up when they're ready and allow them to develop and become what you hope is a core for the future, then a lot of people are going to be out for blood with this ownership group in this front office, because all they've said is, this is the next core. We're waiting for them. We're going to build around them. But then if you don't do it right, well, then it's like, well, what did we do? We just wasted 3 years waiting for these guys to come up, and you didn't even manage the process correctly. I think, also to Joe's point, I think Anthony's probably the first guy to come up. And not that we need outfield help, because not that we need outfield depth. We've got plenty of outfield depth. But especially if they're in it, if he, over the next 2.5 weeks, does really, really well at Worcester, I could see, a little bit of, infusion with the excitement if you call him up when rosters can expand on September 1st. But I still believe in these guys, and I think that you got to build around them. But, the big thing that I think you have to do moving forward, especially if they don't come up this year, whether it's regardless of how many, is I think you have to spend more money in the wintertime. Because if you're not going to call these guys up, if you're not going to do anything until these guys are ready, and then you don't spend to build around them, that's kind of a tough look. It'd be nice, to see them and hopefully help make a playoff push. But they got to get the process right and make sure that these guys are good to go. And again, maybe they're up in 2 weeks, maybe not, but you got to follow the right steps and make sure that they're good to go and develop these guys the right way.
Fair enough. Yeah. Zach, what about you?
Kind of the same. I mean, we've been hearing about it for 3 years, right? That at least Marcelo Meyer is the next big thing. Roman Anthony, I do always have a bit of skepticism when a prospect makes such a meteoric rise the way that Roman Anthony has. Now it looks like he's legit and here to stay. But at first gave me a little bit of pause. I'm also concerned about how much pressure that Benny, said that we're putting on these guys, right? Like if we're expecting them to come up and produce right away and they don't, we've seen how this city and, the sports media reacts to that. And we've seen it crumble people. So if they don't come up and they aren't, the big three that we expect them to be right away, like, are they going to ever figure it out? Are they ever going to, get over that hump? So, I'm worried about that. Now, you can kind of offset that by spending and filling in the pieces and maybe trading some of these left-handed outfielders away. Could have a conversation about who that's going to be. But the pressure is something that concerns me if they don't perform right away. And also, are they actually going to spend, right? We've been asking them to spend. We've been hoping that they spend every offseason for the last, what feels like a decade, but it's really only been 5 years. We heard Chaim Bloom say that we don't want to be a team that, has a 5-year turnaround. Well, it's been 5 years, Chaim, and I know you're gone now, but so there needs to be willingness to spend. There needs to be willingness to supplement some of these holes that we have. So I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see what they do. We've been talking about it for a long time. I'm hoping that they can be what they're hyped up to be. But there is some skepticism, at least from me, about like if they don't perform, then how are they going to respond to the backlash?
Yeah, I mean, for me, we talk about ownership, and the reports last offseason was, okay, they're waiting for this wave of guys to come through. And I remember talking to you, Ben, off the record, obviously, that it annoyed me that if they're saying, okay, we're going to wait for them and then we're going to spend, why not spend now, knowing if you're that confident in them, knowing that cheap, good, young talent is coming up? So it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think it was their excuse to not spend last offseason. And, I won't get deep into it, but if you're putting all your chips in on these prospects that the GM who brought them in is getting fired, I don't really understand how that makes a ton of sense. To the point of, we talked about Mayer, Teal, and Anthony. I'm high on all of them. I think they all have a good spot. Joe, I know you mentioned the Jansen move. I completely agree. I think Jansen could be a guy that they retain. And I think Connor Wong is a guy that they could trade. Solely for the fact is I hate Wong's defense. It drives me nuts. He's got a good arm. His bat has become above average, certainly above average for a catcher. But I don't like him behind the plate. He's a shit framer. He calls a decent game, but he's just not consistent enough as a framer behind the plate that if you're just average as a framer, you can get by. If you're bad and you start costing pitches for your team, a ball that should be a strike and it gets called a ball because you don't know how to angle your glove and you're not consistent enough, that becomes a big issue. I think his long-term future isn't at catcher. And to be honest with you, I think he's going to need to transition to be a second baseman, and it could work. He still will be above average hitting second baseman because it's not like there's a ton of stud second baseman hitters in the league. But unless he figures that out behind the plate, which I don't see, I think he's going to be gone. I think that they could trade him and kind of sell high on him and keep Jansen. And when Teal's ready, they got that left-right combo so that they don't have to throw Teal in the fire. I assume what Cora seems to be doing, and this will be probably the biggest obstacle once they're kind of all ready, is Cora doesn't like having first-year lefties specifically hit against lefties. We saw it with Casas last year. We're seeing with Abreu this year. If they have an influx of 2 or 3 guys all at once that are all lefties in the majors, they can't be only playing against righties, or else there's going to be an imbalance and they're not going to be someone's going to have to play versus lefties. And I didn't even mention all through those 3 guys. There's Christian Campbell too. That dude should be in AAA, to be honest with you. He's got the least amount of time in AA, so I understand why they're keeping him. The kid can play center field and middle infielder. He's batting 340 in AA with just a double or a home run or a triple every single game. Basically, he gets 1 or 2 hits every single game. He's just been as consistent as anybody in AA. I like the future of the team, but I don't think any of us have a tremendous amount of confidence in them spending this offseason. Until we see it, I don't believe it. And so I'm going to be skeptical. I'll be optimistic that it will happen, but to kind of all your point, if these guys don't pan out, ownership's going to be in a terrible, terrible spot, and Craig Breslow will be in a terrible, terrible spot. So I'm optimistic about the future, but it's going to be a lot of shuffling pieces, and hopefully Craig Breslow can make the right moves in deciding who to keep. I've been a little bit vocal that I think it's going to be Jarren Duran who's shipped out. I think his value is the highest it's ever going to get heading into this offseason. He's got the least amount of control. He's a left-handed bat. He's very, very good right now. You could get a stud pitcher for him, a stud major league arm that's ready, that's here and established, and get him in the door and kind of instantly surge the entire rotation and make the rotation go from a shit rotation to a pretty good rotation. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of it for the Red Sox I want to talk about. I know we got a lot of Patriots, so we can kind of transition into that. Preseason game 2 happened for the Patriots, obviously, on Thursday night, a couple nights ago. We saw what I think most people believe was a pretty good start for Drake Maye, what you could have expected in his first extended outing. I'll start with you, Joe. What's your kind of overall thoughts on the preseason game 2, how Drake Maye looked, and kind of this whole, are you buying into that there's still a QB competition kind of in the mix?
That's what Judon Mayo said, right? So I think Mayo's had a really bad offseason. I think the burning cash blew up in his face. I think weaponizing the offense blew up in Elliott Wolf's face. So the fact that, Judon Mayo is saying these things, it's not doing any favors for anyone personally, but I got a spark seeing Drake Maye. I've been down at camp. I think the kid's loaded. If we were down at the playground and we were going to pick first pick, he's the guy. Brissett's only going to play.
Good way to put it.
Here's the deal. This is the absolute truth. The people saying Drake Maye is not ready, it's a shield against the Patriots. The Patriots aren't ready. They don't have an offensive line. They don't have top receivers. They have who is the best player on the Patriots? You can't even. There is no clear cut best player.
Certainly not on offense.
But I mean, what I'm saying is Michael Onwenu the best player because he's the best lineman? Like safeties that don't give me safety. They don't have a best player, so they need someone to save them. It's Drake Maye. They're not going. I agree with not playing him. By the way, he doesn't have to play to develop. He can be scout team, all that. My point is that was a spark. I think it showed you that this guy, I think he can play. Me personally, I've watched a ton of rookie quarterbacks come into the league and play right away. Yep, they have growing pains. The biggest issue for the Patriots is the Patriots. They are not set up for success. Throwing him into the mix would be a huge problem for his success. So they're scarred by Mac Jones. The other thing is this. I think Mayo saying this stuff is kind of a message to Jacoby Brissett. Brissett got the $8 million, was told he's the starter. He throws the poor interception. They got to get his shit in gear. You know what I mean? I swear on it, whatever.
Yeah,
you're good.
He's got to get it in gear because that's what I think is going on. Him saying there's a quarterback competition, I think on Mayo's part is irresponsible, but I think he's doing it to motivate Jacoby Brissett. I don't realistically think Drake Maye is going to start. Here's the other thing. Look at the schedule. You want to send Drake Maye on the road at Seattle on Sunday Night Football against the Jets? It's a bad start. If I was looking at if they were going to start him at some point, I look at the London game against the Jaguars. That's when I would look at it. But the Patriots aren't ready. When the media tells you that Drake Maye is not ready, it's a shield because the Patriots have $50 million in cap space and haven't improved their offensive line in 5 years or gotten a weapon. I love the Patriots, guys. I'm a season ticket holder for years. But the way that they have operated since Tom Brady has left is completely unacceptable, and anyone who defends them is enabling them. They should not be at the bottom of the NFL 5 years after Tom Brady.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this. I've been talking about this, especially on X, about Belichick's post-Brady approach. He had the agenda that I need to compete post-Brady. I need to show that I can win post-Brady. Anyone who says kind of otherwise, I think you're just kind of lying to yourself. Belichick wanted to prove that he could win without Tom Brady. When in reality, post-Brady, he probably should have reset the team. He didn't. He kind of brought in Mac Jones, and they just kind of tried to wing it, retool it, and get it on, back on track, and it didn't work. And his mistakes over the last 5 years has directly put the team where they are right now. Like you said, since post-Brady, they've made too many mistakes. They missed on too many players. They didn't properly address the O-line. They didn't properly address weapons. They're in a shit spot offensively. So now Drake Maye is here, and me and Ben were very high on him pre-draft, and so we were beyond thrilled that he was drafted to New England. We had no interest in really trading out unless it was some beyond ridiculous type of offer. I don't know. I'm not 100% set on the idea of him playing week one. The one thing I've been saying since the start is this. It really, to me, it has nothing to do with Maye versus Brissett. It's not like Maye needs to outplay Brissett. And I know Maye has been saying that, but I think it's a lie. If Maye is ready, if they feel Maye understands the playbook, his footwork is improved, he's working well within the pocket, he doesn't look lost, he's not making the dumb mistakes. If they feel he's ready, I think for the most part, unless the O-line is that bad, that he should be out there. If he's not, don't play him. Like you said, sit him for 4, 6, 8, 10 weeks. So be it. I'm not going to be upset if they don't start him. I'm not going to think it's some colossal mistake if they don't start him week one. But for as much as I think the schedule's certainly not easy, especially to start the season, if they feel he's ready, I think he should kind of be out there. But that's the big question. Is he ready? Ben, do you think he's ready? Do you think he's kind of shown you enough to make you feel comfortable with starting him?
So I'll kind of break this out into two pieces. So physically, yes. I was pretty, along with other people, probably severely disappointed that he only got, 7 snaps in the first preseason game. He only threw 3 passes. So there wasn't really anything to really gauge game one on, right? So there were the reports coming out that he was going to get the second quarter and into the third, which is exactly what we got. And I think physically speaking, there were a lot of signs of encouragement. The big show obviously was it wasn't caught, but the deep ball to Baker on 3rd and whatever it was, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10. Again, Baker couldn't come up with it, but the totality of that play where he feels a little bit of pressure on the, off the right side, slides in and up into the pocket and it enables himself to step into a throw and really let it fly. And I think that really showed some growth that, I haven't been down to camp. So I haven't, seen anything other than clips on the internet, talking heads discussing what they've seen or what they haven't seen. But it certainly shows that, I think physically speaking, he's growing. So I'm at a point where him being ready is solely based on his ability to grasp the playbook and going through progressions and understanding and reading a defense. The physical talent is all there. I think we really saw it at times really show up in the game the other night. So I think it's really going to come down to, his understanding of the playbook and grasping what Alex Van Pelt wants to do here. Because, again, the physical ability is there, and that really showed up. I don't want to see him unless the Patriots feel like they can protect him and that he's ready to take the reins, that he understands what he's doing, and then, that they want him to develop in game-like situations, which, you can only really do so much of that in camp and the preseason. I think when he first came out the other night against Philly, the only difference they switched in the offensive line was they put Leverett at center and left the rest of the O-line in, at least for a couple of series, and then they switched it out. So, I thought while he was in there with, 80% of the starting offensive line that we would see theoretically, or at least have seen in camp, they kept him upright. So that's certainly encouraging. But as long as, he doesn't speed up the game, which it didn't look like he did. He looked calm and poised, which was really encouraging to see. It's hard to say whether I think he's ready now. Again, it's all going to come down to, his understanding of the offense and the playbook. But physically speaking, I don't think there's any question that if you were just going off of what he can bring to the team in terms of his physical talent, excitement, like you could hear it on the TV, how many people were applauding when he came into the game, which was saying something considering, they're probably at 50, 60% capacity. I mean, standard for a preseason game, but that's not a lot of people. And you could hear them with the excitement, and being that they don't have the guy on the roster, he could infuse some of that excitement into the team. And, but physically speaking, I think, like he could play from that standpoint right away. I just don't want them to rush into things because they see the physical talent and they start to kind of salivate over it. They need to develop the guy correctly and make sure that when he does step in, that given the circumstances that he has some pieces around him where he can succeed, and that he's just not going to get blown up every play and you're going to ruin his mental development. But again, they got to build around him. What they didn't do with Mac Jones, they got to give him a few extra pieces so that it makes things a little easier, and then he can kind of develop and find his role and his way in this offense.
Fair. Zach, about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on record as saying I'm open and probably more willing to sit him until he's ready. I think a lot of that just comes down to what we saw with Mac. I think I called it post-Mac stress disorder or whatever I called it before. But I can't go through another PMSD. I can't go through another season or career with Drake Maye the way we do with Mac Jones. Now, I do think that there are signs of encouragement, as Ben said. I was listening to 98.5 yesterday, I think it was, about what they're incorporating into the offense. It sounds like Van Pelt is kind of incorporating a bit more of what Drake Maye did at UNC, and with his current offense and what he did with Cleveland last year. I think it was Chris Gasper said a good point about like his footwork is the major issue, right, with Drake Maye. But if you're in shotgun, it becomes a much less of an issue because you don't have to drop back as often, things like that. So I think if you kind of put him in shotgun a bit more, that at least diminishes the issue of footwork. But again, I think, Joe, to your point, we've been so starved at offense for a long time since Brady left, and it's because Bill doesn't know shit about how to build an offense. He's tremendous at defense. He's just always been really, really bad at building an offense, with the exception of 07 and a couple other like hits with Edelman and Gronk. But like he
had Tom Brady. Like that's what it came down to for 2 decades. He had Tom Brady to kind of gloss over all these inefficiencies that he built on the offense. Now, he had a good O-line for above average to good O-line most years. But weapons-wise,
he didn't have anything really until Gronk,
And I had a guy on X going back and forth. He was blaming Kraft, that Kraft is cheap and didn't want to pay a top receiver.
I would. That's what I'd go with. Like, what guys, they have a new – you brought up the Belichick for 4 years. Well, we're in year 5 now. Nobody wants to come in. Yeah, you can say that Bill drove it into the ground, but last year, Bill tanked the season because Robert Kraft meddled. He told him, you're going to have Bill O'Brien here. That was never going to work. It was never going to work. And so once Kraft meddled, Belichick tanked. Hey, if this is how you want to get involved, this is what it looks like. So again, the Krafts are behind everything. The Krafts think that Gerard Mayo can be a head coach. We don't know that. He's never been a coordinator in his life. And then they bring in Alex Van Pelt. Yep, but
big wait and see.
No other team in the league has a coach right now that was never a coordinator. Never. Like Andy Reid's the only one, and that's a different story. He already got fired in Philly. So, I mean, the Krafts think it's them. They think they're the reason why there's been success. But, dude, just to bring something up, the Javon Baker throw the other day, the one that he missed, Baker got open. He's a 4th-round pick with a lot of talent, but he's boom or bust. Imagine if you actually had Calvin Ridley or Jacoby Myers and spent $1 more million. Like, that's Kraft. You can't blame Belichick for that. That is Kraft. Belichick gone. Elliott Wolf in. They're spending, but they don't want to go the extra mile still. That is on ownership. So this is a show. We have opinions, but I think that's a fact that Robert Kraft doesn't want to go the extra mile. Just imagine if that's Brandon Ayuk out there throwing a Drake Maye throwing to. Just imagine if it's Ridley. Just imagine somebody else that's an elite receiver. That's where they're at. They're at a 4th-round guy they're trying to hit on versus paying for a guy who can actually do it.
Yeah, I mean, they especially in recent years, the last 3 or 4 years, the Crafts have certainly stepped up their influence on decisions. Whether we heard about the whole Mac debacle, whether they kind of forced the pick on him, whether they forced to keep him. Last season, we heard that Belichick might have wanted to trade him. I do agree, certainly, that Kraft influenced the Ridley decision to not kind of give him the extra influence to try to come here. Whether the whole girlfriend didn't want to come up north or not, we don't know if that's like the truth or not. But
money, bro. It's all about money, man.
If Kraft kind of went and said, we're offering 22, let's offer 24 or 25, Ridley could be here. I do think that they made the reports are real regarding Ayuk, and Ayuk just doesn't want to come here. But that comes down to the position the Patriots are in, and that in part is in part due to Kraft over the last few years.
That's the bill too for building a shit team. He's a GM. Yeah, well, he's the one who has to build it,
But I'm talking this year, dude.
Bill this year, but back 4 years, he's done nothing for the past 4 years to build a functional team.
Take Belichick out of everything. They just re-signed all of Belichick's guys. The Belichick stuff's over. The new regime has to overpay to get anybody. They're not going to do it. So guys don't want to come here. So you got to give them a bag. You got to give them a bag. And they don't want to give the bag. Brandon Ayuk doesn't want to play in New England, but if you give him $40 million guaranteed, would he come here? $40 million?
Guaranteed or AAV?
$40 million. Guys, in football, it's about guarantees. It's like
Tommy. Yeah, but he's getting he would get over $100 million. He's certainly getting $40 million guaranteed.
So this is the point. The Patriots suck so bad that if they want to get anybody, they can't just give them, we'll give them $28 million annual. No, you got to give them the bag. If you want somebody, you got to pay them. And in football, they did. To bring up Belichick, in 2021, they paid everyone. They paid Hunter Henry, Matthew Judon, all those guys, and they made the playoffs. So, if the Patriots want to get back to anything, they have to pay the bag. They can't just pay the annual average. They got to give them the bag, and that's still on them. If they wanted Calvin Ridley, they could have him. And if they really wanted Brandon Ayuk, even though he doesn't want to play here, they would have had to give him the bag. I don't think he's worth the bag personally, but this is where they're at. Guys, I'm telling you this. Kraft has to pay, and he's not right now. And that's what's going on. To give you an example, right? Years ago in baseball, when the Red Sox had Pedro Martinez or whatever, it was unheard of to give someone $20 million. It was unheard of. The Red Sox were desperate. They paid someone a contract that was absurd, but that's how they got him. The Patriots now have to do that with everybody.
Yeah, well, until they, in a perfect world, May shows enough this year where it kind of changes the narrative on the Patriots. I agree fully on Ridley. They didn't go the extra mile to get him here, whether they just felt like, that's not the guy we want to overspend. That's, I guess, their decision. But if they offered Ridley 26 a year per year, he would be here probably right now. I think that Ridley would have said to his girlfriend, hey, no, or his wife, hey, we're doing this. I'm taking the extra mile. I do believe that they did the extra mile with Ayuk. I do believe by Mike Reese's talks about 32 a year and Fowler saying they gave top tier guarantees. Granted, we don't know what that exactly means. But Ayuk wants to stay in San Francisco or maybe go to Pittsburgh, and he's going to end up staying in San Francisco because San Francisco is going to go up to the 29-30 per year mark, and he should stay there. That being said, I do think that they gave the bag offer to Ayuk. And in that scenario, it just kind of didn't work out. But to your point, either May current team improves and shows momentum going forward, or unless they drastically overpay for a guy, they're going to struggle to get players here. To go into the conversation of what I was saying earlier, it's Kraft especially in the early years and up until Brady left, really, I don't think had a tremendous amount of influence on the roster. Maybe Brady specifically, because obviously we know about the turmoil with Jimmy G and all that type of stuff. But Belichick, for the most part, invest in weapons money-wise. And other than Gronk, really, and Randy Moss, he didn't do that. He paid big money to defensive guys. He had no problem doing that. He gave Gilmore the highest, I think it was the highest AAV for a corner. He paid Hightower, D-Mac, going all the way back to, the Dalius Thomas days. Like, he paid a shit ton of defensive guys. He really ever did offensively. So now we're in a new regime, and the question is, are they going to finally do it? And to Joe's point, he said, we're going to weaponize the offense. Him and Mayo kind of came out strong and wanted to kind of, I think, give a optimistic view to fans. And in exchange, they kind of put themselves in a corner to kind of, make that happen. It has not happened. I think that the weapons, while I like Polk and Baker, the weapons could be better. And more specifically, the left tackle position could be better. The biggest, I think, mistake on Wolf's part so far is not about finding a tackle in free agency. It was because the tackles in free agency sucked, absolutely sucked. It was, they should have said, okay, the tackles in free agency aren't good. We need to be aggressive here and find, if we're not going to draft a tackle early, and find a viable, reliable tackle on the market. And I know that's easier said than done because tackles don't get traded that often. But you could have found a veteran that was reliable and that you could have put at left tackle for the next 2 or 3 years and said, I know that this position is at least going to get solid play. And that's kind of been his biggest mistake so far. And it's going to directly influence what we see from or don't see from Drake Maye for the next few weeks. And one more thing on May that I kind of want to just kind of point out. The one benefit between him and Mac that I think doesn't get talked about, I guess, enough is Mac came from a perfect situation in Alabama. He had, Judy, Smith, Waddle, Jamison, Williams, I believe 3 of the 4. Was Williams already in the league?
I think
Smith
Williams
was already in. One of those 4 was already in the league. He came from a great situation where he wasn't asked to do a ton. He just sat back and just shredded defenses. May's coming from the complete opposite. He's coming from a situation where he's the superior talent around a bunch of talent that is just not good. The O-line was bad. The weapons were mediocre at best, especially in his last year after Downs got drafted. And he had a new OC in the final year. So coming into the league, the idea of throwing Maye kind of in the fire of an NFL season, I feel slightly more comfortable with that because I think he's just experienced it a little bit more. So I think that's kind of what has pushed me into the I'm okay if they start in week 1 kind of train. But I don't necessarily think that it's the wrong decision to not start him by any means. You guys kind of, what are your thoughts on like that aspect of it?
I mean, there's something to be said that he meaning Maye, needed to overcome more than Mac Jones did. I don't know how much that really, like how big that really matters on the big stage. I think something that's probably more of a piece is because of the situation he was in, it changed how Drake Maye had to approach the game. But I don't necessarily think that just because he was in a bad situation and still performed at a high level, I don't know how directly that really correlates to his ability to start and be effective right away. because you've seen it where
Not
guys
so much be effective, just not fall apart when it gets really tough around him. Like dealing with the chaos.
Yeah, but you see, like, look at a guy like Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow had an unreal situation at LSU, and granted, he had T. Higgins as a rookie, and then he had Jamar Chase a year later. But he was trending in a direction until he tore his ACL as a rookie, where he looked like you saw a promising future with him in Cincinnati as the number 1 overall pick starting right away, not in as advantageous a situation as he found himself when he was at LSU the year before.
I'm not saying if you're in a good situation, you can't like work in chaos. It's more so like if you deal with tough situations, you're more prone to be able to deal with future tough situations. Not that if you're working.
Obviously, North Carolina, you get talented guys every once in a while, but if you face adversity, sure, I think maybe that probably shows itself where he's a little bit more calm and poised than you'd see out of certain rookies. I mean, you really can't tell until they get up here, and they put the pads on and they're getting hit first. You don't really know. Maybe it helps with the ability to face adversity. Maybe a little bit, but I'm not sure how much that really translates into, how much of a direct correlation it is between facing adversity in college than being able to face adversity here.
That's fair enough. I do want to do one more Patriots topic, more specifically because it kind of branches into the Mayo and Wolf kind of transition here. We obviously saw Matt Judon get traded to the Atlanta Falcons. Joe, what were your thoughts kind of on how it was all handled from, I guess, off-season into training camp? Obviously, there was some turmoil between Judon and the team. Do you think ownership, the front office and Mayo handled it poorly? Did they handle it well? And what were your thoughts on the trade?
I think they could have tried to get more if it was the off season. But it was a bad look. He basically called the Patriots liars, which is a fact. And quite frankly, it looked bad on the Patriots. This is one of the top premier pass rushers in the league. Granted, he's been injured. And granted, they gave him a bump last year, which he took the bump knowing that there's no way he could play for $6.5 million the next year. So that's on the Pats too. And that's not even on Belichick. Belichick gave him the money to then go year to year with the guy, which is what the crowd.
Yeah, he could have, if Belichick would have very possibly given the extension or another bump this year.
Exactly. But don't you want to go year to year with a guy with injury problems who's in his mid-30s, low 30s? So I think the way that Belichick set it up for him was great. But $6.5 million, this guy used to make $14 million guaranteed a year, and he's making $6.5 million. It's an insult to him. It really is. That's where the Patriots need to pay a guy. Now, the question is, do you want to reward a guy who, obviously was yelling at the coach and going at the GM and all that? That's a different story. The fact they got a 3rd-round pick and the fact that the Falcons got one of the top pass rushers and signed Justin Simmons the other day, they just got 2 Pro Bowlers in back-to-back days, yet they were criticized for drafting Michael Penix in the 1st round. Well, now they have 2 defensive players that they got for nothing, essentially a 3rd-round pick. Sounds like the Patriots wanted a 2nd-round pick. I think that might have been reaching for a guy like Judon. But just in reality, though, $6.5 million guaranteed for a pass rusher in the league is insulting. He might get a new deal in Atlanta. I think he will, or they might give him a bump. But, Mayo, at least publicly, him kicking him out of practice might, probably looks good in theory. But I think it's a terrible move in general. Not the pick, not sending him to Falcons, none of that. They no longer have a face of the team. It affected the team. They were upset about it. They were going to bat for him. Every single guy got paid but him. Do
you think Judon would have accepted a bump just this year?
Yeah, from what I heard, is that he gave he says they never gave him an offer. That's at least what he said. I guess he gave them an offer and they never accepted it. So, I just think it was a really bad look for the Pats because they have $50 million. They have all this money. What are you doing? And I get it. You don't want to reward a guy that's been an issue, but this was the face of the franchise. I hate to say it. He was. They don't have one now. That's why I asked you guys, who is the best player on the team?
Probably Barmore, but he's not even playing now. So, I agree completely there. The thing with Judon is they should have handled it more in the offseason. Instead, they kind of kicked the can down the road and thought that maybe he would just play on 6.5, and I think that was a dumb approach towards the whole situation. I don't know if Judon would have just taken a 1-year bump. I think he obviously was pushing for an extension, probably a new 3-year deal and scrapping this one. But they should have handled it in the offseason. They shouldn't have let it go to camp and said, we'll let it get public. And Judon came out and trashed them a little bit and said that they're not even kind of trying and all that. Like you said, he was arguably the face of the franchise and was one of the most vocal leaders on the team. So, I think that they should have. I like the return, so I'm not upset about the idea of trading him. And I do like the concept of they kind of stood their ground. No matter how much they screwed up the process of it, I think they at least stood their ground and said, okay, we don't want to extend him and he's causing issues. Let's get him out of here. But I would have given him an extra $5 million this year. Make it about $8 or $9 million guaranteed and another $2 or $3 million at least in incentives to kind of make him happy and keep him around this year. I don't blame them for not wanting to extend him beyond this year or maybe next year, but I think they kind of royally kind of screwed up how they approached it with him. You agree, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think the optics were certainly tough. Being on the field, talking to Mayo, getting kicked out of practice, 15 minutes later shows up and he's having animated conversations with the GM. I mean, obviously he had expressed frustrations over not having a deal. Certainly should have been handled in the offseason. I don't know what the hesitancy was with the Pats. I understand, he was hurt last year. And, in years past, he may have been a little bit dinged up. I know the first year, he kind of faded in the second half of the year where he didn't really perform nearly to the level he did in the first half. I would have been fine with, you rip up the 2024 deal and you give him a brand new 2-year deal and you give him market value or a little bit more. I think he would have accepted a market value offer. And, to your point, Matt, maybe you give him some incentives, where if he achieves certain numbers, he earns himself, a little bit more
even
money.
Just playing time. I wouldn't have even pushed the sack incentives just as long as you're out there.
Well, I mean, the guy. In 2021 and 2022, he played 17 games. So I don't even know if you needed a playing time incentive when he was only hurt significantly injured one time in 3 years.
Yeah,
maybe sure.
So contract-wise, it would have been deemed not likely to be earned, so because he didn't play much last year. So they would have had the flexibility to do it, even though they didn't really even need it. But I would have just said here's 8 or 9, maybe even 10 million guaranteed. We'll give you another 2, 3, or 4, and pretty easily reachable incentives. If you're healthy, and maybe you could do some low-level sack incentives. If you're healthy and you're playing at least some solid ball, you'll make another $14 million this year, and I think that would have kept him happy enough. But we obviously don't know that specifically. Zach, what are your thoughts?
I was fine with it. I mean, it seemed like it was heading that way anyways. Obviously, would like to keep him around. Our defense and team as a whole is better with him. But everything that transpired, I feel like it was heading that way. As you said, paying everybody around him and not paying him being public on Twitter and having, I don't know if you want to call it a blow up on the sideline, but that little spat on the sideline with him. It was heading that way. The return I was thrilled with. Like I said before, if it was Bill, he would have gotten a 7th round pick and we got nothing for him. So I like the fact that, we got a 3rd. And now you kind of move forward with Keon White, move forward with Anthony Jennings, or move forward with, maybe a platoon type thing. Keon White looks to be, a pretty good pass rusher, at least from what we saw last week. So I was fine with it. Like I said, he's not part of your future of this team. He's 32 years old, coming off a pretty significant injury. You don't know how he's going to recover from that. So, yeah, overall fine with it. But again, our team and defense as a whole is worse on paper now. We'll just have to – are we going to be able to replace or at least replicate his production from 2 years ago and the year before? Is that with one person? Is that with two people? I don't know. I don't know if there's anyone as good as him on this team yet. We haven't really seen or heard anything. So, yeah, overall fine. But like I said, we'll have to see what happens.
I also think it's a bad look for the rest of the league. Like, wow, they just traded their best player and didn't pay him with all that salary cap space. This is another reason why players don't want to come to New England, because they feel like they don't pay their stars. And they didn't pay their biggest star in Tom Brady years ago. This is where I go back to Kraft, guys. It's I hate to be like the hot take radio guy, but it's just a fact. It's the easiest thing to lean on is, you guys could talk about the Red Sox doing the same thing, right? The Red Sox look like crap. Like they don't have pitching. Well, now the Patriots don't have a line, don't have a receiver, and basically have a bunch of mid-tier play. Like they have mid-round picks that they're trying to hit on. That's what they have. And maybe someone comes out of it, but it's a bad look on ownership not paying their best player who people associated him with the Patriots, And I think he tweeted out he had a broken heart. I heard that he really wanted to stay here, and they didn't.
Yeah, I think it was actually McCarthy on 98.5 that they were talking about it, and he was like, "Oh, Judon didn't want to be here," and I was like, "I don't agree with that. If you gave Judon an extension, I think he wanted to stay here very much and retire. I mean, that's what he told us." Joe, how much do you think this Judon decision was a Kraft decision, or you think it was just Elliott Wolf saying, we don't want to give this guy a 2 or 3 year deal because he's really not part of the long-term core?
It was probably an Elliott Wolf decision, but I think that Elliott Wolf's decision was because ownership didn't want to invest in him.
Fair enough. All right, I want to finish this up. As I mentioned to you before the pod, Joe, we do a state your take moment. It could be anything, sports related, non-sports related. I know Zach did ranch is better than blue cheese, is that what it was?
Yeah. That's what it was, yeah.
Last pod. Do you got one for us? Some type of hot take that
you know what? You guys can go, and I'll kind of build off what you guys say.
All right, Zach, you got one?
I got one, yeah. Kind of going off of JR's, we'll call it ambitious Bruins take last week. He said that they were going to come just short of their record-breaking season 2 years ago. This coming up year, I have the Pats at about over 500 this year. Based off of last year's record, I mean, if you have a functioning quarterback you win at least 6 more games. If Booty gets his 2 feet down in the week 1 against the Eagles, that's another win right there. And then going into this season, I think there's a lot of winnable games, especially in the middle towards back end of the year. I think they win against I do think they win against the Seahawks in week 2. I know Joe had a different take there. I do think they win against the Jaguars and the Titans and the Bears, among other teams. So I think they're going to miss the playoffs ultimately, but if end up with about 9 wins. Because I think just if you have largely the same team as last year, maybe a bit worse on defense, but a functioning quarterback, someone who's not Mac Jones and the seeing ghost back there wins a lot more games last year. And I think they have a very similar schedule this year.
Yeah, for a while I was on the train. I took over 5.5 wins about 3-4 weeks ago. Barmore is obviously probably out for the year, and now the Judon trade, I don't feel nearly as confident in that anymore.
Yeah,
because I think you lost probably your 2, I would say maybe your 2 best players on the team, no longer here. So I think they're going to be hard pressed to get up to that level. But like you said, I mean, a lot of it just comes down to the QB position. Pat's QB position gave games away last year. So if it's Brissett and he's just serviceable and doesn't lose you games, yeah, I mean, I think that they could have a better record than last year. But yeah, I mean, a winning record, that's certainly a bold.
I mean, look at the Chargers game last year. You tell me you can't win, you can't score 7 points against the Chargers last year.
They had 8 games last year where they were within 7. They lost by 7 points or less.
Yeah,
and I want to say 7 of them were 5 or less. Yeah,
there was the Redskins game in particular. They're like, if Juju catches that ball, they're driving. If Mac Jones can just sit in the pocket against the Colts, like there's a lot of games that Mac and just the team in general gave away. I think with the actual functioning quarterback, they do go out and win 9 games, but still miss the playoffs.
All right, Ben, how about you?
So mine, I'm gonna dive into the college football world, and say that I think the 12-team college football playoff is a huge mistake. I think it's too many teams, and I think just depending on how it goes, I don't really think they'd ever really backtrack and go away from a 12-team format. But I think 12 teams is too many. And, I'll go so far as to say, that you're going to find occurrences and instances where I think this is going to be a bad look for college football. The cream rises to the top. I think that when you have the format that they have, I don't know as if any of those first round games are really even, how many of those games are going to be competitive. I don't really know. I mean, 4 or 6 feels fine. I just personally don't think that, teams ranked outside the top like 5 or 6 are really up there with those top 4 teams kind of, worthy of a bid for a national championship. I think that every so often you might see a couple of examples of why did one team gets left out of the top 4 and they could have made a run. But I don't think that happens often enough that, throwing in teams that are, 8, 9, 10, 11 in the country, or in this case where if you have a Power 5 conference champion like an SMU who happens to win their conference title and they're ranked in the top 25, they get, the last spot in the tournament, on that. Don't love it. I'll be curious to see how it plays out, but I think 12 is too many, and I'm not sure it's going to be a good look for college football.
Fair. I didn't like 12. I was fine with 8 because I do think that there was a couple teams that could cause more chaos and then just missed out. I mean, we see it every year where there's usually one team, maybe 2 that were like, it was a toss-up of who's going to get that last spot. So I was fine with 8. Going 12, I think, is a little bit too much of a stretch, but I mean, yeah, we'll see kind of how it plays out. For myself, I've already mentioned it, and I would be perfectly fine if I'm wrong with this, but it's that Jaren Duran is not a Red Sox start of next season. I think that they're going to use him to go get a stud pitcher. I think they firmly believe in these young core players, and they have so many lefties, and Duran has the least amount of control of all these guys that they're going to say, this is the guy that has the most value. This is the guy that's going to cost us the most and has the least amount of control. It's time to kind of move on, and it will hurt. Has had an outstanding year, a top 10 year in the MLB, really overall. But just my prediction, not necessarily that I want him to be traded, but I think he will be traded this offseason. So, you guys see it happening?
No,
I do.
I can see it happening. Yeah, based on what you just said, like he does have the least amount of control. His value is never going to be higher. His value probably is the highest of anyone we have on this team. So yeah, I do see it happening.
All right, perfect. All right, Joe, we'll finish up with you.
Yeah, just to piggyback off what you guys all said, I have the Patriots as the worst team in the league this year. I bet them plus 345. Yeah, last year they probably should have won more games, but this is this year, and the schedule's too tough. Worst team in the league, plus 345. As far as the 12-team playoff, there might be some teams on the back end of that 12-team playoff that might not make it. But I'll tell you this much. If Penn State can get into the mix and take on some team from the ACC like a Florida State, I'd take Penn State all day long. So I think the college playoff might have some upsets. But I want to see it first. But I do think some of the back-end teams, like, if a team from the AAC is taking on an SEC team, they're doomed,
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's why I felt like 8 was kind of the better compromise.
Yeah, we'll see, right? This is why they play the game. So we'll find out. And Jaron Duran, the number one thing for me is he can't be a leader. He's not a leader. Say what you want, dude. We're in a new age. You can't say things. We're in a new age, and the weirdest thing about the Jaron Duran thing is his jersey sales were number one. Like that, I don't know how to feel about that. Like, is that like
Ben said that to me, and I thought it was a joke. I thought it was like a fake account that posted it.
Are like people supporting him saying that? Like that to me, I don't understand. Listen, the kid's a good player. He's dealt with mental illness. Doesn't give him a pass for what he did. But I just think that they'll trade him because, yes, the value is high, but they need leaders, man. Saying stuff like that's not leadership. He's actually never really shown leadership. I like the kid, and I know he's dealt with a lot, but I would trade him. Like, they should have done this with Ellsbury years ago, and then he had that big year and then hit free agency, and they lost him, So, plus they got all these outfielders coming up. So,
and I really think they don't love Willie Abreu. The person, the player.
I think he's a terrible outfielder.
Defensively?
How many balls has gone over his head for a home run, or he's tried to attempt to for 4? I can at least think of 4. Listen, Willie Abreu is really here's the deal, guys. We're like satisfied with guys who hit like 270 and have 15 home runs. Like, they can replace those guys. You know what I mean? Like, that's just, and the other guy is Pipes O'Neal. Like, yeah, he's done some really nice things, but like, replaceable. These guys are you want mainstays, and even the Yoshida's like at a DH. He doesn't want to be a DH, but like, is he a mainstay at DH? I like the guy, I really do. But that's what I mean. They have so many replaceable parts on their team, besides the pillars. But Duran's a great player, he really is. But I would trade him for leadership alone, not because of his ability.
Yeah, my one thing with Willier, I think, is his upside is still pretty high compared to what he even is right now. I think he has a much higher ceiling than even what he's showing right now, which is, I think, a pretty good baseball player. But yeah, I mean, as he is right now, he's probably pretty replaceable based off his stats. But yeah, what's your state your take?
Oh yeah, my take was I saw this thing about pitchers. But Major League Baseball is discussing starting pitching only going 6 innings, and I'm absolutely out on that. Like, that's what we did at Parkway Little League growing up. Like, when you played Little League, you could only pitch 7 innings a week. So, like, these are Major League Baseball players. Like, and I get it. You're trying to preserve the arms and everything like that. I absolutely hate that idea. They've changed the game enough to where I like it now. I do.
Wait, I think it was minimum 6 innings, wasn't it?
Whatever. I don't care.
It was a minimum. They had to go a minimum of 6 innings, barring a pitch count or an injury.
I'm in on minimum 6 innings, but like, Brian Bayo ain't gonna get there. You know what I mean? Like, there are just some guys that so either way, I'm out. Like, I am out. Don't mess with the pitchers. Don't
I think it's
the bullet slider. Stupid. Stop with the off-speed stuff. Like, they're ruining the. It's because of money, and I get it. These guys are. It's so weird now that like these pitchers now are they considered closers. The salary rankings, like baseball has driven me crazy. Like, I don't know. The game I used to love is no longer the game. The game I played, I'm 42, so I'm probably older than you guys. The game, like, I played against Rich Hill, and he's still pitching in Major League Baseball. Like, I grew up with Manny Del Carmen. He's bartending somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, the game is not. That's why I think it's hard to relate, because it's not game that we played, right?
It's all analytical based and numbers based now instead of just trusting your gut.
Exactly. Like, remember, I haven't played video games in a long time, but I used to simulate Madden seasons and not even play the games. I would just be the roster guy.
Yeah.
That's what baseball is now, you know?
Yeah, like I'm at a point personally, like I guess like a secondary state your take. I'd much rather watch college baseball than MLB at this point. I think it's a far better product.
I watch WNBA basketball because I think it's almost a better product than some of the other stuff that's out there because of the pace of the game, you know?
Yeah.
That's fair enough. All right. That's going to wrap us up today. We went not too far over what I expected, so I think we did a decent job. Joe, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. I know this is kind of your off day, so waking up a little early. What time do you usually get up with the schedule you're on?
I don't know, man, but I'm big into the hobby. I got a big card collector. I got a big show next week at Polar Park. So I got a booth, table 60. Come on by for all you Worcester people. But I love the hobby, man. I feel like the hobby dictates what's going on in sports. So if you're interested in certain players and cards, those are the players you want to watch on the field. So I got about 25 graded Drake Maye cards ready to go, baby. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the hobby, dude. And so I got up early today to get some stuff done for next week's show.
Awesome. Yeah. Was it next? You said next week at Polar Park?
Next week, Polar Park. I think it's from like 9 to 5. I'll be there. I got a big booth. You'll see my Joe Murray Media on there, and I'll be slinging some cards for everybody.
All right. Yeah. So, from Raise the Banner and Joe, like I said, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. We'll be back next week. Maybe not during the week, maybe week after this weekend. We'll probably have a lot of final Patriots preseason thoughts. And hey, maybe we'll have a decision on what the QB situation is. So until next week, we're Raise the Banner, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for coming on, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.